The champagne flutes chinked like distant bells as I balanced them on my tray, weaving through the crush of silk gowns and $1,000 suits. The ballroom of the Metropolitan Grand Hotel glittered under chandeliers that cast fractured light across the marble floors like scattered diamonds. It smelled of expensive perfume, imported cigars, and that particular scent of wealth. A subtle mixture of privilege and power that seemed to coat every surface. "Champagne, ma'am?" I offered to a woman draped in pearls, my voice soft and rehearsed. She plucked a glass from my tray without a glance, continuing her conversation as if I were nothing more than a piece of furniture. I was used to it by now. 2 years of serving the elite at Harbor City's most exclusive events had taught me one essential truth. Invisibility was part of the uniform. My black vest and white shirt clung uncomfortably in the overheated ballroom, a stark contrast to the flowing designer dresses surrounding me. My feet already ached in the mandatory heels, and we were only 90 minutes into what would be a brutal 12-hour shift. The annual Children's Hospital benefit, they called it, though I suspected half these people couldn't name a single child in need. I'd taken this extra shift because rent was 3 days overdue, and the tips from these events sometimes meant the difference between electricity and sitting in the dark in my cramped studio apartment. The thought of the eviction notice taped to my door made my stomach twist. "Excuse me." A man in a charcoal suit shoved past me, nearly toppling my tray. Not his fault, of course. I was the one expected to materialize and vanish on command. "I'm sorry, sir," I murmured automatically, steadying the glasses with practiced precision. That's when I first noticed her. The little girl sat alone at a table near the far wall, her legs swinging slightly above the floor from a chair too high for her small frame. While other children chased each other across the dance floor in squealing packs, she remained perfectly still, methodically arranging sugar packets into precise rows. One line, then another, then a third, building an invisible structure only she could see. Her small face was locked in intense concentration. Blonde hair pulled back with a black ribbon, dark eyes focused with an almost heartbreaking intensity. Her dress was beautiful, custom-tailored black satin with white stockings and patent leather shoes, but it was her complete isolation that caught my breath. In a room packed with hundreds of people, no one seemed to notice her at all. I made my way around the perimeter of the ballroom, delivering drinks and collecting empty glasses. Every few minutes, my eyes drifted back to the girl. A couple approached her table, but instead of speaking to her, they simply took empty chairs and moved them to another table. The girl didn't look up. She clutched a worn stuffed tiger to her chest with one hand while continuing to arrange the sugar packets with the other. "Anya, table 12 needs water refills, and don't forget you're on dessert service in 15. My supervisor, Marcus, snapped as he rushed past, his clipboard held like a weapon. I nodded and turned toward the service area, but something made me freeze. Near the girls' table, a disturbance rippled through the crowd. The kind of subtle shift that happens when someone truly powerful enters a space. That's when I saw him. He didn't walk so much as claim every inch of ground beneath his feet. Tall, easily 6'3", with shoulders that strained against his perfectly tailored black tuxedo. His hair was dark, touched with silver at the temples that somehow made him look more dangerous rather than distinguished. His face could have been carved from ice, all brutal angles and cold precision. But it was his eyes that stopped my heart, dark as black water and twice as deep, scanning the room with the calculated focus of a wolf surveying prey. 3 men flanked him, their broad frames unable to conceal the bulge of weapons beneath their jackets. They moved in perfect formation, creating a protective barrier that no one dared breach. The crowd parted without being asked, conversations dying mid-sentence, forced smiles appearing on frozen faces. I knew who he was without ever hearing his name spoken aloud. Everyone in Harbor City knew of Nikolai Volkov. His name was whispered in back rooms and shouted in headlines. His business dealings made front-page news while everyone pretended not to know where his fortune truly came from. The Russian who had seized control of the city's underworld with brutal efficiency. The wolf of the city. The untouchable Mafia king. He moved through the ballroom like a blade cutting silk. People who had been ignoring me all night suddenly seemed just as invisible as I was. Back straightened, jewelry clutched, eyes averted. He acknowledged none of it. His gaze remained fixed straight ahead. I realized with a jolt that he was walking directly toward the little girl. When he reached her table, something extraordinary happened. The ice-carved face softened, barely, just for a heartbeat, but enough that I caught it from across the room. He placed a hand gently on the girl's shoulder and leaned down to speak to her. She didn't look up from her sugar packets, but her hand stilled. She nodded once. Volkov straightened and murmured something to one of his men, who immediately pulled out his phone and stepped away. A woman in a crimson gown approached, her smile blindingly white as she extended her hand to Volkov. He took it briefly, his expression returning to granite. They exchanged words, hers animated and bright, his minimal and cold. Then she glanced at the girl and said something that made Volkov's entire demeanor change. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. The woman's smile cracked. She stammered something else, then retreated as quickly as her heels would allow, her face flushed with humiliation. I should have moved on. I had tables to serve, duties to complete, a job I desperately needed to keep. But I couldn't stop staring at the little girl who sat alone, clutching her tiger, invisible to everyone in the room except the most dangerous man in the city, and me. I was refilling water glasses at table 9 when I heard them. I can't believe he brought her here. The woman's voice dripped with contempt, low enough to seem discreet but loud enough to ensure she was heard. She wore a dress the color of blood and diamonds that could choke a horse. Her companion, a silver-haired man with a face like old leather, leaned in conspiratorially. What do you expect? The child is defective. I heard she doesn't even speak. It's shameful, the woman continued, sipping her champagne as if discussing the weather. Parading that broken thing around like it's normal. She just sits there like a little ghost. Honestly, it's disturbing. My hand tightened around the water pitcher until my knuckles went white. I should have walked away. I should have kept my mouth shut, my head down, my survival instincts intact. But something in me, something reckless and furious, snapped. I leaned down between them, my voice a sharp whisper that cut through their smugness like a blade. That child has a name. And the only disturbing thing here is 2 grown adults mocking a little girl who's done nothing to you. The woman's head whipped toward me, her expression shifting from shock to outrage. Excuse me? How dare you? Have a lovely evening, I said coldly, straightening and walking away before she could finish, before my supervisor could materialize, before I could think about what I'd just done. My heart hammered against my ribs. I'd just confronted guests at a $5,000 plate charity gala. I'd probably just lost my job. But when I glanced back at the little girl, still sitting alone with her sugar packets and her tiger, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. The music shifted. A waltz began, sweet and lilting, and suddenly the dance floor filled with families. Fathers twirled daughters in pretty dresses. Mothers swayed with small sons in tiny suits. Laughter and movement and connection filled the space like light. And the little girl watched. She had stopped arranging her sugar packets. Her small hands had gone still, one clutching the stuffed tiger, the other resting on the white tablecloth. Her eyes, wide and dark and achingly sad, followed the dancing families with an expression that shattered something inside my chest. She wasn't just watching. She was longing. I knew that look. I had worn it myself as a child, pressed against windows, watching other families, other lives, wondering why I didn't belong anywhere. My feet were moving before my brain caught up. I crossed the ballroom floor, my heart thundering, my survival instincts screaming at me to stop, to turn back, to stay invisible. But I couldn't. Not anymore. I knelt down beside her table, meeting her at eye level. Her gaze shifted to me, startled but not afraid. "Hi," I said softly. "My name is Anya. Would you like to dance?" The entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. The little girl stared at me with those dark, unreadable eyes, her grip tightening on the stuffed tiger. The music swelled around us, violins and piano weaving through the air, but she remained frozen. Then slowly she set the tiger down on the table with careful precision. She slid off the chair, her patent leather shoes clicking softly against the marble floor. And she placed her small hand in mine. Her palm was warm and slightly damp, her fingers impossibly tiny against my own. I stood carefully, leading her toward the edge of the dance floor, acutely aware that we were crossing some invisible boundary I didn't fully understand. "I'm not very good at this," I whispered as we reached an open space. "So we'll just make it up as we go. Is that okay?" She didn't answer, but she didn't pull away either. I placed her small hand on my shoulder and held her other hand gently in mine. We began to sway, simple and slow, just rocking back and forth to the rhythm of the waltz. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. That's when I noticed the silence. Not complete silence. The music still played, the orchestra still performed, but the conversations had stopped. The ambient noise of the ballroom had evaporated like smoke. I looked up and my stomach dropped. Everyone was watching us. Hundreds of faces had turned in our direction. Wealthy guests stood frozen mid-conversation, champagne glasses suspended halfway to painted lips. Other children on the dance floor had stopped moving, staring with open curiosity. Even the orchestra seemed to be playing softer, as if afraid to break whatever spell had been cast. The little girl didn't notice. Her eyes were closed now, her head tilted slightly as if listening to something only she could hear. Her grip on my hand tightened, and I felt her relax into the gentle rhythm we'd created. "You're doing beautifully," I murmured. Then I felt it. A pressure against my skin, a weight in the air that made every nerve ending come alive with warning. I didn't need to look to know. But I looked anyway. Nikolai Volkov stood at the edge of the dance floor, absolutely motionless. His dark eyes were locked on us with an intensity that felt physical, like a hand around my throat. His expression was unreadable. Not angry, not soft, but something far more dangerous. Calculating. Assessing. Predatory. One of his men leaned in to whisper something, but Volkov raised a hand without breaking his gaze, silencing him instantly. The little girl and I kept dancing. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Two invisible people choosing for just this moment to be seen by the entire world. And the most dangerous man in the city watched every single second. The music was ending. I could hear the final notes approaching, the violins beginning their descent, and with them the protective bubble around us would shatter. I started to slow our movements, preparing to let the little girl return to her table, to her solitude, to safety. Then he was there. Nikolai Volkov moved like a shadow-given form, crossing the distance between us in 3 long strides. Up close, he was even more overwhelming, tall enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes, broad enough to block out half the ballroom. The scent of expensive cologne and something darker, something like gunpowder and winter, surrounded him like a threat. Every instinct screamed at me to step back, to apologize, to run. But the little girl was still holding my hand and I refused to let her feel my fear. "Papa." Her voice was small but clear, the first word I'd heard her speak. "We're counting steps. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. She swayed slightly, still caught in the rhythm of the now silent music. Something flickered across Volkov's face, so fast I almost missed it. The granite cracked just for a heartbeat, revealing something raw underneath. He looked down at his daughter, and for that single moment he wasn't the wolf of the city. He was just a father. "Yes, Malishka," he said softly, his voice a deep rumble with the faint trace of an accent. "I see." Then his eyes lifted to mine and the cold returned, absolute and assessing. "You work here." It wasn't a question. I forced myself to hold his gaze. "Yes, sir." "What is your name?" "Anya Hayes." Before he could respond, the little girl made a soft sound of distress. Her hand had gone rigid in mine, her breathing quickening. I glanced down and understood immediately. The music had stopped, the dance was over, but no one had told her what came next. The disruption to the expected pattern was causing visible anxiety. Without thinking, I reached into my vest pocket and pulled out the smooth river stone I always carried. A nervous habit from childhood, something to ground me during the worst shifts. I pressed it gently into her free hand. "Here," I whispered. "Feel how smooth it is. You can rub your thumb across it like this." The little girl's breathing began to slow. Her thumb traced the stone's surface in small circles over and over, her body gradually relaxing. She looked up at me with something that might have been gratitude. When I looked back at Volkov, his expression had changed entirely. He was staring at me with an intensity that felt like being dissected, like every secret I'd ever kept was being pulled into the light. He turned his head slightly, his gaze never leaving mine. "Dmitri." A man built like a concrete wall materialized beside him. "Yes, sir." "Get her information. All of it." I'd spent the entire night replaying the moment, wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing, half expecting to be fired when I arrived for my morning shift at Rosie's diner. Instead, I got something far worse. He walked in at exactly 7:15, just as the breakfast rush was starting to build. Dmitri, the concrete wall of a man who'd stood beside Volkov last night, filled the doorway like a bad omen. His suit was too nice for this place, his presence too sharp, too wrong against the faded vinyl booths and chipped formica counters. Every conversation in the diner died. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Even the cook Tommy went still at the griddle. Dimitri's eyes found me immediately. Anya Hayes. It wasn't a question. My hands were shaking as I set down the coffee pot. That's me. He crossed the diner in 4 steps, his movements economical and precise. He reached into his jacket, half the diner flinched and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He set it on the counter between us with a heavy thud. "From Mr. Volkov," he said, his accent thicker than his employer's. I stared at the envelope like it might explode. "I don't understand." "Open it." My fingers felt numb as I lifted the flap. Inside was cash. More cash than I'd ever seen in my life, bound in neat stacks with paper bands. $10,000, the bands read. And beneath the money, a single note written in brutal, slashing handwriting. "You will come. Car is waiting outside. Arrangements have been made." The air left my lungs. Arrangements. "Your rent has been paid for this month. Your supervisor here has been informed you won't be working today. The car is outside." Dimitri's expression didn't change, but something in his voice made it clear. This wasn't a request. "And if I say no?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. For the first time, something like pity crossed his face. "Then I wait while you say goodbye to this place and you still come." "Mr. Volkov doesn't make requests, Miss Hayes. He makes statements of fact." I looked down at the money, at the note with its absolute certainty. "Arrangements have been made." As if my consent was assumed, my compliance inevitable. As if I was already his. "What does he want?" I whispered. "He wants to talk. That's all I'm permitted to say." Dmitri gestured toward the door. "The car is a black Mercedes. I'll give you 5 minutes." He turned and walked out, leaving me standing behind the counter with $10,000 in cash and the sinking realization that last night, when I'd knelt before that lonely little girl, I hadn't just changed her world. I'd stepped directly into the crosshairs of the wolf. And now he was calling me home. The Mercedes moved through the city like a shark through water. Silent, sleek, and utterly untouchable. Dmitri drove without speaking, and I sat in the back seat clutching my purse, watching Harbor City transform from crumbling neighborhoods to manicured estates hidden behind iron gates and stone walls. The Volkov estate appeared like something from a different world. High walls topped with cameras and what looked like razor wire. A gate that opened silently at our approach. Armed guards in tactical gear who tracked our movement with eyes and weapons. The driveway wound through perfectly maintained grounds that felt more like a military installation than a home. The mansion itself was brutalist and beautiful. All clean lines and cold stone, windows like dark eyes watching everything. It didn't look like a home. It looked like a fortress. Dmitri opened my door. "This way." Inside was worse. Marble floors, vaulted ceilings, and the overwhelming sense of being watched. Cameras in every corner. Guards stationed at strategic points. Everything was pristine, expensive, and absolutely sterile. No warmth. No life. Just control. "Anya." The small voice shattered the cold silence. I turned to see her. Tamsin, the little girl from last night, running down the massive staircase, her movements slightly uncoordinated but determined. She still clutched the stuffed tiger, and in her other hand she held the river stone I'd given her. She crashed into me with surprising force, wrapping her arms around my legs. I knelt instinctively, meeting her at eye level. "Hi, sweetheart. It's good to see you again." "You came," she whispered, her dark eyes searching mine as if she'd been afraid I wouldn't. "I did." I smiled, even though my heart was hammering with fear. She took my hand with absolute trust, tugging me toward the stairs. "Come see my room. Papa said you'd want to see it." Her bedroom was a revelation. Soft purple walls, fairy lights strung across the ceiling, and shelves filled with toys organized with meticulous precision. Sensory items everywhere. Textured balls, weighted blankets, noise-canceling headphones on a small desk. A visual schedule hung on the wall with pictures and words marking each part of her day. Someone had created a safe, structured world for this child. "It's beautiful, Tamsin," I said softly. "She likes purple." The deep voice came from the doorway. Nikolai Volkov filled the frame, still in a dark suit, still radiating that suffocating presence. But here in his daughter's room, something about him was different. Softer at the edges. Her mother did too. The past tense hung in the air like smoke. Tamsin didn't seem to notice. She was showing me her collection of smooth stones, each one labeled and categorized. Volkov's eyes met mine over his daughter's head. Raising a child like Tamsin in a world like mine is complicated. Most people don't see her. They see a problem. A defect. His jaw tightened. "You saw her. She's not invisible," I said quietly. "She never was." "No," he agreed, his gaze never wavering. "She wasn't. And neither apparently are you." Volkov's study was exactly what I expected. Dark wood, leather furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the fortified grounds. He poured himself vodka from a crystal decanter but didn't offer me any. This wasn't a social call. He sat behind his massive desk, fingers steepled, watching me with that unnerving intensity. I remained standing, my purse clutched like a shield, waiting. "Tamsin has had 7 nannies in 3 years, he said finally. Highly trained professionals with degrees in child development and special education. He hated all of them. Wouldn't speak. Wouldn't engage. Some lasted 3 days. The longest made it 6 weeks before she quit." He took a slow sip of vodka. "Last night my daughter danced for the first time in her life. Because of you." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. "You gave her your stone," he continued. "You understood what she needed before I could even explain it. You saw her distress and you knew how to fix it." He leaned forward slightly. "How?" "I don't know," I admitted. "It was just instinct." "Instinct." He repeated the word like he was tasting it. "My daughter needs someone with that instinct. Someone who sees her as a person, not a diagnosis. Someone she trusts." His eyes locked onto mine. "She trusts you." My heart was racing. "Mr. Volkov, I'm not qualified. I'm not asking for qualifications. I'm asking for what you already gave her last night. Attention, compassion, understanding." He set down his glass with deliberate precision. $7,000 per week. You'll be her companion, her caregiver, her advocate. You'll live here in the guest wing. Full benefits. Complete financial security. The number hit me like a physical blow. $7,000 per week. That was more than I made in 3 months. That was rent paid on time. That was electricity that never got shut off. That was a life instead of survival. "I know what I am, Miss Hayes," Volkov said quietly, his voice dropping to something almost dangerous. "I know what world you'd be entering. This house has enemies. My life has violence. There are risks you cannot imagine." "Then why would you bring me into it?" I whispered. "Because my daughter smiled last night for the first time since her mother died." His voice cracked just barely on the last word. "Because she's been alone in a room full of people her entire life, and you were the first person to kneel down and ask her to dance." I thought about my overdue rent. My disconnection notices. The eviction letter. I thought about working 3 jobs and still drowning. I thought about Tamsin's small hand in mine, her trust, her loneliness. I thought about the choice between safety and freedom. When do I start? I heard myself say. Volkov's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "You already have." My first week at the Volkov estate was an education in controlled chaos. Dmitri ran me through the protocols like a drill sergeant. Never answer the door. Never open the curtains without checking with security first. Never leave the grounds without 2 armed guards. Stay away from the East Wing. That was Volkov's private office where his business was conducted. The panic room was behind the bookshelf in Tamsin's playroom. The code changed weekly. Memorize it. I learned Tamsin's routines with the same precision. Breakfast at 7:30, always the same. Scrambled eggs, toast cut into triangles, orange juice in the blue cup. Morning activities from 8 to 10. Puzzles, sensory play, educational games. Lunch at noon. Quiet time with audiobooks. Afternoon outside time if weather permitted. Always in the enclosed garden, always supervised. Dinner at 5. Bath at 6:30. Bedtime at 7 with 3 stories, her weighted blanket and the tiger named Stripey. She flourished under the structure and with me she bloomed. She spoke more each day, simple sentences, observations, questions. She laughed when we played with kinetic sand. She held my hand without prompting. I almost forgot I was living in a fortress. Almost. It happened on Thursday night. I was reading to Tamsin in her room when the sharp crack of gunfire shattered the evening quiet. 3 shots, close enough to make the windows rattle. Tamsin's hands flew to her ears, her face crumpling. I grabbed her, pulling her into my arms as shouts erupted from somewhere below. Heavy footsteps thundered through the hallways. More gunfire, this time from a different direction, the guards returning fire. "It's okay, sweetheart," I whispered even though my heart was trying to break through my ribs. "We're safe. We're safe." The door burst open. Dmitri, gun drawn, his face carved from stone. "Panic room. Now." I carried Tamsin behind the bookshelf, through the hidden door into the small reinforced space. Dmitri sealed us in and the silence was absolute, suffocating. Tamsin was rocking in my arms, humming a low, repetitive sound to self-soothe. We stayed there for 47 minutes. When Dmitri finally opened the door, his knuckles were bloodied. "It's handled." I carried Tamsin back to her bed, got her settled, waited until she finally fell asleep. Then I walked downstairs on shaking legs, following the sound of voices to the main hall. There was blood on the marble floor. Not much. Someone had already started cleaning, but enough. Real blood. Real violence. Real consequences. Volkov stood near the entrance, talking to his men in rapid Russian. When he saw me, he dismissed them with a gesture. "Are you hurt?" His eyes scanned me clinically. "No." My voice was steadier than I felt. But Tamsin was terrified. "I know." Something like regret flickered across his face. "It won't happen again. You can't promise that." I met his gaze directly. "This is your world." I knew that when I signed on. "But she's 6 years old, Nikolai. If I'm going to protect her, I need to know when danger is coming." He studied me for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Agreed." It started with small moments I didn't expect. Nikolai began joining us for Tamsin's bedtime routine, sitting in the corner of her room while I read stories, his presence solid and quiet. Sometimes he'd take over, his deep voice gentling as he read about princesses and dragons, his daughter curled against his side. In those moments the wolf became something else entirely. 3 weeks in, Tamsin had a meltdown in the garden. A gardener had trimmed her favorite bushes without warning, disrupting the visual pattern she'd memorized. She dropped to the ground, screaming, her hands hitting her own head in distress. I knelt beside her, keeping my voice low and steady, not touching her yet. "Tamsin, I see you're upset. The bushes changed. That feels wrong." Nikolai appeared like a shadow, his face tight with worry. He moved to pick her up, his instinct to fix, to control, but I caught his wrist. "Wait," I said quietly. "Let her process it." He froze, every muscle tense, clearly warring with the urge to make it stop. But he trusted me. He stepped back. I pulled out a smooth stone from my pocket, I carried several now, and placed it near Tamsin's hand. "When you're ready you can hold this. We'll count together. The bushes are different but we're still here. You're safe." It took 8 minutes. Slowly her screaming subsided into sobs, then hiccups. Her hand found the stone. Her breathing regulated. When she finally looked up at me, exhausted and vulnerable, I opened my arms. He crawled into them. Nikolai watched the entire thing with an expression I couldn't read. Later that night he found me in the kitchen making tea. "How did you know what to do?" "I didn't," I admitted. "I just knew what not to do. You can't force her through it. You have to let her feel it." He poured himself vodka, silent for a long moment. "Her mother would have known what to do." His voice was rough, raw. "Irina understood her in ways I never could. After she died, Tamsin stopped speaking for 6 months. I had the best doctors, the best therapists, and I still couldn't reach her." He looked at me and for the first time I saw past the armor. "You reached her in one night. You reach her too," I said softly. "She lights up when you read to her. She checks the door every day at 6, waiting for you to come home. She deserves better than this world." He gestured vaguely, encompassing everything. The fortress, the guards, the blood that had stained the marble. "Better than me." She doesn't need better. She needs you. I set down my tea, taking a risk. You're a good father, Nikolai. A complicated, dangerous, terrifying one, but good. He stared at me like I'd spoken a language he'd forgotten existed. Then so quietly I almost missed it. Stay. I'm not going anywhere, I promised. And somewhere between that moment and the next breath, everything shifted. We weren't employer and employee anymore. We were something far more dangerous. We were becoming something real. The kiss happened on a Tuesday in Tamsin's doorway after bedtime stories. Nikolai had been standing closer lately, his hand lingering on the small of my back when he passed, his eyes tracking me across rooms with an intensity that had nothing to do with security protocols. I felt it too, the magnetic pull, the way my breath caught when he entered a room, the dangerous warmth spreading through my chest. That night he walked me to my room as he often did. But at my door he stopped. His hand came up slowly, giving me time to pull away, and cupped my jaw with surprising gentleness. Tell me to stop, he said, his voice rough. I should have. Every rational thought screamed at me to step back, to remember who he was, what he was. Instead I rose on my toes and closed the distance. The kiss was controlled at first. Testing, questioning. Then something broke in both of us and it became desperate, consuming, inevitable. His hands tangled in my hair. My fingers gripped his shirt. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. This is dangerous, he whispered. I know. If they know you matter to me. I know, I repeated. I don't care. 2 days later I learned what that really meant. The kidnapping attempt happened at 3 in the afternoon. Tamsin and I were in the garden when I heard Dimitri's sharp command. Inside. Now. I scooped up Tamsin and ran. Behind us, gunfire erupted. I made it to the panic room, sealed us in, held Tamsin close as she trembled and hummed her anxiety away. Through the security monitor I watched it unfold. 4 men breaching the gate. Dimitri and 3 guards engaging them. And then Nikolai, moving like death itself, efficient and brutal and terrifyingly competent. When it was over, when we emerged, Nikolai's hands were shaking as he pulled Tamsin into his arms. Then he looked at me and I saw it clearly, naked fear. They came for her because of me, he said hoarsely. Because of what I am. They failed, I said firmly. And they'll keep failing because we won't let them win. We. His eyes searched mine. I crossed to him, placing my hand over his heart. We. I'm not leaving, Nikolai. Not her. Not you. 6 months later I wore a ring on my finger and a gun on my hip. I knew 18 ways to secure a perimeter and could disassemble a Glock in under a minute. Dimitri's insistence. Tamsin called me Mama now, the word soft and certain and beautiful. We lived behind bulletproof glass. Armed guards shadowed our every move. Violence lurked at every corner. But inside these fortified walls we had something precious. Tamsin laughed every day. Nikolai smiled when he thought no one was watching. And I had finally found what I'd been searching for my entire life. A place to belong. A family worth fighting for. A home worth defending no matter the cost.